Welcome back to another edition of Georgia Forages, the digital series. My name is Lisa Baxter, and I'm your University of Georgia State Forage Extension Specialist. Today we're going to talk about integrating legumes into your forage system. Legumes have several benefits. Not only do they increase forage yield and improve forage quality, they are a valuable source of time-release nitrogen. This nitrogen comes from a symbiotic relationship between legume plants and rhizobium bacteria. The rhizobia colonize nodules on the roots of healthy legumes. Nitrogen is absorbed from the air and ultimately fixed into ammonia that's taken up by the plants. So the plant is getting nitrogen from the bacteria, while the bacteria is getting energy from the plant. Now there's a lot of factors that will affect how much nitrogen we actually can fix with each forage species. But generally we can expect 50 to 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre from annual clovers, 100 to 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre from white clover, 100 to 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre from red clover, and up to 300 pounds of nitrogen per acre from alfalfa. Now the cost savings of that nitrogen fixed by the legumes will vary depending on where you are in the state, the cost of the nitrogen source you're replacing, and also sometimes the time of year. Now let's look at some of the most popular forage legumes that we can grow in Georgia. We'll start with cool season annuals. There are a lot of different options in this category because this includes our annual clovers, vetches, and even things like winter peas. For this video, we're going to focus on the three most popular that we see in Georgia. The first is crimson clover. Crimson clover is well adapted to the coastal plains and lower Piedmont, especially on sand or loam soils. It's fairly tolerant of soil acidity, but prefers a pH of around 6 for optimum growth. Crimson clover, like many legumes, does not tolerate poor drainage. Maturity can vary based on variety, but is generally earlier than other annual clovers. Crimson clover has good cold tolerance and a medium potential for bloat. The reseeding potential of crimson clover is quite low, and so we recommend planting every year to ensure a successful stand. Next, we have arrowleaf clover. Arrowleaf is also adapted to the sand and loam soils in the coastal plains and lower Piedmont. It requires good drainage and is also not tolerant of soil acidity or even low fertility. Arrowleaf clover is much later maturing than crimson clover. It also has good cold tolerance and provides a low potential for bloat when grazing livestock. Unlike crimson clover, arrowleaf clover provides a high reseeding potential. Finally, let's talk about ball clover. Ball clover is also adapted to the southern parts of the state, but prefers a loam clay type soil. Ball clover is more tolerant of poor drainage than the other two that we've talked about. It's intermediate in maturity and provides good cold tolerance. The bloat potential for ball clover is quite high, and so we need to use caution whenever we're grazing livestock on ball clover. Just like arrowleaf clover, ball clover also has a high reseeding potential. Next, let's talk about cool season perennial legume options. Probably the most common in this category is white clover. White clover is well adapted statewide except for our very sandy sites. It prefers a pH above a 5.8 for optimum growth and development. White clover can last for many years if we choose a variety that's adapted to our site and it's allowed to set seed each year. Even though the yield is quite low for white clover, it only provides a medium bloat potential, and the quality is quite high. Red clover is another perennial option for our state. It can be grown statewide as long as the soils are medium well to well drained and the pH is above a 6. The lifespan will vary depending on your location in the state. If you're in the northern parts of the state, then you can expect red clover to act as a biennial or even just a short-lived perennial. But if you're in the southern part of the state, red clover tends to act like a late maturing annual and we will need to reseed each year. The yield for red clover is higher than that of white clover, and it has less bloat potential. Finally, let's look at alfalfa. Alfalfa is a perennial that requires well-drained, deep, fertile soils that with good management and a pH above 6.5. We also recommend that the subsoil pH be above a 5.5. Lifespan of alfalfa is typically 3 to 5 years, but there are stands in this state that have persisted much longer, even over 10 years. The yield is much higher than that of the clovers. We can expect 4 to 6 tons per acre if we're growing it on dry land, and 5 to 8 tons per acre if we're irrigating the alfalfa. The bloat potential for alfalfa is quite high, and so we need to use caution whenever we're feeding out this high-quality forage. Let's shift gears and talk about warm season annual legume options. We don't use these often in Georgia because they're expensive to establish, provide relatively low yields, and are generally not grazing tolerant. Usually if we're recommending these, they're for a very specific niche market or situation. If you are trying to fill a niche market, one option is forage soybeans. They are essentially the same as row crop soybeans and are adapted to a wide range of soils. They typically yield between 2 and 3 tons per acre and can be grown as a summer annual. However, they contribute very little nitrogen or quality forage to your forage program. Another option is cowpeas. They're very similar to soybeans but have a lower yield. They're adapted to a wide range of soils and can be grown as a summer annual. However, just like soybeans, they also contribute very little nitrogen or forage quality into your forage program. Cowpeas are more often used as a wildlife attractant rather than feed for our livestock. Lastly, let's talk about warm season perennial legumes. One of the most popular options in the southern parts of the state is perennial peanut. Perennial peanut requires medium well to well-drained soils with a pH of at least 6. It can last for many years if it's managed well. It can yield between 2 and 5 tons per acre and has a low bloat potential. Many producers will steer away from perennial peanut because it must be sprigged and can be slow to grow in. However, it is an excellent legume option for us in the extreme southern parts of the state. Last, let's talk about Sericea Lespedeza. We can grow this statewide as it's more tolerant of low pH, drought, and poor soil fertility. Sericea Lespedeza can grow for many years and yield about 3 to 4 tons per acre. It also has a low bloat potential. Now that you know the options, it's up to you to decide what is the best legume for you. Are you looking for a cool or a warm season legume? Are you ready to commit to a perennial, or do you just want to stick with annual clovers for now? How much time and cost are you willing to put into the establishment of this crop? And finally, are we just harvesting it for hay or baleage, or are we trying to graze cattle on it? We need to consider all of the pieces of the puzzle before we start pairing together grasses and legumes. Regardless of which legume you choose, make sure you're complementing your perennial grass base and not competing with it. Because remember, that grass base is what will carry your farm through significant weather events and drought periods.